Good evening, everybody. Welcome back to the Enough to Keep Going podcast. This is episode number 215. I'm your host tonight, Talmaster99. And with me, excuse me, I have one Mr. Swiss Guard. Swiss, how you doing?
Quite well, thank you.
Excellent. And Mr. DBQ Hams. DB, how are you?
I'm glad to be back. Yeah, so good to be here with all of us, gentlemen.
Yes, I think you had, the week off last week? Couple weeks?
Yes, the week off. Yes, that's what it was. Not that I was at work until the podcast started.
You weren't working.
Yes.
You're researching games and playing games. We know. And finally, last but not least, we have Mr. Game Logic. Game, how are you doing? He waved. He's good. All right, this is our deep dive episode. I believe part 2 for October. And we're going to go through our news for the last couple weeks. Once again, there's quite a bit of stories here these last couple weeks, but we dwindled them down to, I won't say handful, but a good amount so we can get through the night here. All right, first up, Game Logic. We got a story for you. We got an update on Fallout. Not a new game. It's an update. Not an update for Fallout 76 or even Fallout 4. No, we go back even further. Game Logic, what's the update for on Fallout here?
So this is a kind of a little of a meander through history for those little kiddies out there who haven't been gaming for more than 20 years like we have. But for those who don't remember, way back in the day, I hate to say, at the turn of the century, or shortly thereafter.
You should go with the turn of the millennium.
Right. There was a little thing called Game for Windows Live. It was Microsoft's first real attempt to kind of converge the Xbox ecosystem and its resurged commitment to the PC gaming space. Microsoft has kind of always, because it has to be, kind of been a champion of PC gaming from a marketing perspective. It of course does DirectX, which for a very long time has been one of the critical interface abstraction layers that allow PC games to run and have access to hardware resources, because there's a whole thing that you have to go through for security reasons. We will touch on that point slightly later this evening, but there have been open source ways to go about doing that, but DirectX has been around forever. As a result, and because most PC gaming happens on Windows, Microsoft has to have this very close association to PC gaming. That existed before the Xbox ever came into being. When the Xbox came along, really their approach to online services and online infrastructure support for PC gaming really kind of shifted its focus and attention to the Xbox. They really hadn't been in that space on the PC side before. They had allowed others like Sega, like IGN, to actually provide the infrastructure for those spaces back in the days of dial-up. But once they got the...
man, now I'm thinking about GameSpy.
Exactly, I was seeing the green logo.
Exactly.
Wow.
And actually, MSN.com also had a web-based, IP-based support for PC gaming, but they were just one of many. They weren't kind of this big, prodigious center of mass in the space. But with the Xbox, they became really one of the premier central forces for games, for service-based support for games. And actually, quite honestly, they were the biggest, because Sega had kind of done some things back in the, actually, I think at the tail end of the Genesis era, but more so in the Dreamcast era and then on into the Saturn era. But with Xbox Live, they really put down this massive footprint in the gaming space as a console provider, because the PlayStation service really wasn't there back in the PlayStation 2 days. And Sega was on the wane, and Nintendo didn't, and still to this day doesn't really have a great online service. We're going to touch on that a little bit later tonight too. But then Games for Windows Live came along. Xbox Live was great. It was awesome. But then they tried to integrate that on the PC side, and that was bad. And the way I remember it, it was somewhat sort of kind of okay if you were just doing, if you went to a package, to a brick and mortar store and bought a game that had Game for Windows Live, and you brought it home and you loaded it, and it was just Games for Windows Live. But when everything went digital and you bought a Steam game that was a legacy Windows game that still had games for Windows Live. It was horrible. And part of that was because there were kind of some DRM modules and components within games for Windows Live. And what happened was, I don't know why they didn't eliminate this as soon as they started allowing those games to be sold on Steam. But what happened is the games for Windows Live DRM and Service Phone Home kind of components would fight and go into race conditions with what the Steam components were trying to do. And you would get this really janky, kind of wobbly, creepy crawly, almost toppling over kind of dance of these two things trying to get through their startup sequences. And you would often have things like the Steam thing hadn't completed, but the games for Windows Live thing was trying to complete, and they were fighting each other. And then often I played Sector 8 was the game that I remember that had this in it. That was a big problem for me. And you would often just, 50% of the time, if you were lucky, 50% I thought was a good success rate. 50% of the time, the game just wouldn't start. It would just get hung up, like in the loading screen. And you would have to shut it down. And back in the days when, like, right-clicking down in your sys tray and closing a service was just like getting into the task manager was not even as efficient as it is today. It was just a horrible kind of experience. And starting one of those games up, I used to have to like budget an extra 30 minutes of time in my evening to like monkey around getting that thing started. So finally, for some reason, almost all of these things have had games for Windows Live stripped out of it. I still played. I think it was Dirt 2 Extreme Edition was one of these things that had it in there. But finally, I guess now that's because Bethesda's been acquired by Microsoft, they finally took this out of Fallout 3. The Fallout games continue to be a super popular game amongst gamers. I guess people had bought it on Steam, and were still playing it, and it still had this goofy Games for Windows Live thing in it. And so there you go. It's finally out. You can now return to your seats and walk about the cabin and I guess play Fallout 3 without fear that the thing is just going to blow up in your face whenever you boot it up.
I appreciate the history lesson in that.
Yeah, no, you went way back further than I thought you were going to. I think I had I think it was Red Fraction Gorilla had that Windows Live baked into it at one point when I first got it on PC, like way back in the day too. So I should see if that's still in there. I think that was the game. But yeah, that's it was kind of a funny when I saw that story. I'm like, what? Fallout 3? I was like, whoa, can't believe it. But yeah, it's interesting. Swiss or DB, any other comments?
I was gonna say, it made me remember that Fallout 3, the Games for Windows Live that was my creation of my Xbox profile, was because I didn't own a 360 at that point, and so I was playing Fallout 3 on PC and needed to create my Xbox profile.
Nice.
I didn't really have a gaming quality rig around that time, so I didn't do much PC gaming. But anytime somebody says Games for Windows Live, it's just I have that icon that I saw plastered on all the PC games when you're in like Walmart. So
it's like gold and silver or something like that.
I just remember the window. It was like it kind of tried to match like the Windows 7 icon, I think, to try to, I don't know, cross the streams, I guess. But
nice. All right, so let's head out of Fallout and jump into some Tom Clancy here. So a few weeks ago, I believe it was, during Ubisoft's 20th anniversary celebration of just kind of the larger Tom Clancy franchise, they had announced Ghost Recon Frontline, which is battle royale, more or less like game in the Ghost Recon universe. And they had said that there was going to be a closed beta test coming out on I believe the 14th for PC, just for PC users, and then eventually that was going to kind of expand out to probably other platforms at some point. But just recently, and I'm trying to remember, this is from Games Radar, so this is just last week actually, they delayed that closed beta. They haven't said exactly when they're going to open it back up, but they kind of just said, you know what, actually, I was reading this article, I didn't really like give any quotes other than saying we have an important message, we're closing out, the beta for now. Thanks for the support, kind of like that, blah, blah, blah. They didn't really give any reasons or anything, but so that's we got an announcement of the beta of the game, and then the beta, and then now the beta's been delayed. So it's a little weird, I guess. I don't know. I was kind of thinking about it when I was going through the article, and they don't really like touch on like why they think they did it or not. But I was kind of thinking, is this more of because they need to just work on the game itself, or is this because of all the backlash that game and game announcement kind of brought upon itself? Well, I was going to say brought upon itself, but just came out. Everything that backlash came out, after the announcement, because obviously, people like, another, battle royal or battle royal type game. I mean, if I remember correctly, this is the one where it's kind of there's a bunch of teams that you're kind of battling against, and you do like kind of objectives and stuff throughout at least the one mode. So it's a little bit different than just like a straight up, King of the Hill battle royal match. But I guess people obviously were still like, it's like we've seen this before. We don't want, we want a Ghost Recon game. So what do you guys think? Do you think it was just like, hey, maybe we announced this a little too soon, so we got to kind of pull back and kind of work on the game, or is this more of a hey, let's let the kind of the backlash die down, excuse me, and let's see what happens in like a month or two, whenever like I said, whenever they decide to open the beta back up.
I'll jump in and say, I mean, I think probably it's in part that it is not ready for prime time yet in terms of a closed beta. I think also this is a tough time to be a shooter, to have a closed beta around the same time as we just had, week after week of Call of Duty Vanguard, Halo Infinite, Battlefield 2042, that if you're having something with a much larger budget that isn't designed to be a free play game, that you get a beta that comes out around the same time, in the eyes of consumers, in the eyes of media, how difficult is it going to be not to draw comparisons in terms of quality and level of gameplay? So I think part of it is also timing. Like, give it a little bit of time. Come in with a closed beta like this in December, when everything has released and people are looking for something different. It seems like there's a different windows in terms of from a marketing PR perspective. I could see a rationale for why somebody could say, hold off on this.
Yeah. And also, I was thinking, I lost my thought now. I don't know what I was thinking. So was there a game logic?
Said it right there.
I
You were
started
thinking.
thinking.
Oh man.
While I try to find my question, you guys, Swiss or Game Logic, you have any comments?
Yeah, I thought the phrasing was odd. It's like, stay tuned for this important message, and it's like we're not gonna have it, and it's like, sometimes like, I guess I would have expected more if it was. I mean, I'm not saying it's not this, but if it was like a problem with quality or something, it's like, we're really excited about Ghost Recon Frontline, and we want to make sure the beta's a polished experience. So we're gonna give it a little bit more time. Like, it's put a positive spin on it. It was just like strange. We have this important announcement, and usually that should be followed by something positive. So, but whatever.
Yeah, the whole thing's weird from both sides. Of course, the conspiracy theory is, as you mentioned, right, is that people thought this was a walk back from an announcement that did not go over well with the gaming community. Do we know when this game is coming out? Is this a 2022 release?
Yeah, I was trying to look for that. I think so, yeah.
I think so, yeah. That's what I remember about it too.
Okay, and so one would presume either Ubisoft big shooter titles come out either in the spring, anywhere between kind of March and Mayish, or they're a holiday release. But what's funny, haha, from the gaming community is, we all got up in arms about the delay, and I'm like, the Ghost Recon franchise really ain't been doing well, like, for the last few years, right? I mean, every release has been something that's been a little lukewarm and a little tepidly, taken up by even fans of the title. And so I'm like, what are we getting wrapped around the axle about like not getting another open world third person action adventure shooter campaign with some co-op in it and some like dark area stuff where you can kind of wander in and play multiplayer if PvP if you so dare. I'm like they've got to do something with it. They've got to one of two things. They've either got to take it all the way back to its roots at the original Ghost Recon, or they got to do this thing. And we all know that companies are of the mindset that they can more effectively monetize by going the direction that they're going. So I don't know. I mean, the sad thing is I feel like Ghost Recon, particularly Ghost Recon as a preeminent Tom Clancy style covert ops shooter, steeped and wrapped in the mystique that Red Storm Entertainment put on those series right before they were given over to Massive. I just think we've lived that part of our lives, and that IP is no longer playing in that zone, and so we should all move on.
Yes, so there's no official release date for the actual game itself. They only had announced the closed beta. But what I was going to say, I remember, since it was a closed beta, but I mean, usually, within a month or two, you get like the open beta, and then the game pretty much releases. So I mean, you would have figured, it's supposed to be beginning of October, maybe December at the earliest, probably like January, February, most likely, or like you said, March maybe, because that's kind of when they usually release it.
Yeah, it didn't seem.
Those kind of like they move around sometimes, but usually lately with the betas, like when those come out, it's not too long afterwards when the game actually comes out.
I agree, but Ubisoft, one thing I will give Ubisoft seems to be hyper specific about informing investors about at least windows that its major IPs are going out in, right? They were the ones last year who came clean and said, look, 5 of these, this is how many titles we're planning on releasing, and this is going to be like the marquee parts of our portfolio. And then we're one of the first ones to tee up to say, look, 5 of these titles have been delayed into whatever. So I feel like the messaging to this point is that game was not coming out in this holiday season. And then I look into next season, and quite honestly, we have the myth that everyone is believing that like there's a slew of like a dozen AAA titles that are all going to come out between the last week of February and the third week of March, in the run up to Easter. And I'm like, that's not going to happen. That's the same thing they said in 2017 or 2018 or whatever, and that didn't happen in 2017. So, but yeah, and then so if you're not heading for this holiday season, then you're talking about releasing in this glut of games that are being stacked up, waiting for delay announcements, right? And so it feels like they would have been shooting for like in that May timeframe that the Division 2 came out, but I don't know.
Yeah, and kind of what you're saying too, DB. I mean, they do have another shooter coming out, which is I believe X-Defiant. I think that is supposed to come out this year, I believe. So I mean, yeah, I mean
that's another free play one though too, isn't it?
Believe so, yeah. Yeah. So I mean,
that's like Tom Clancy mashup, right?
Yeah, that has like I guess all the brains.
Now despite how many times I screw it up, I always ask you guys, is that a mobile game? And I think the answer is no.
No. Yeah.
Correct me if I'm wrong. We have heard dirt silence on that game.
Yeah, that's what I was just thinking. I don't know that it's this year. I mean, I think it seemed like it was going to be one of those that has a small press cycle, but we haven't really seen anything more about it.
It quite honestly,
out, and we don't even know.
It quite honestly feels like a cancellation.
Maybe.
I don't know. Like Ubisoft, they're willing to throw something out there and then wait years before it moves. I mean, just look at Beyond Good and Evil 2. Like, how long has it been since we heard anything about that?
That's never coming out. I'll say that. Yeah, I know. I think X-Defiant's still going to come out. I believe it will. I mean, it had bad press, but I don't think it was nearly as bad as Frontline, and I think that's probably kind of why, because X-Defiant came out first, and then Frontline was like, everybody was like, no, we're not doing this again. So
I just mean, it seems like, and I could be wrong, it feels like we've heard more about Ghost Recon Frontline than we heard. It sounded like we got a press release and then there was silence on X-Defiant. It just, I don't know.
I'm trying to find anything on.
I mean, X-Defiant.
I can't find.
What was that at 8.3 that I thought we got like a trailer and stuff, or am I thinking about a different game?
I think it might have been a little bit after. I think it was their own like Uplay or whatever they called their own like directs.
Okay.
I think, or it might have even just been like its own thing that it was announced.
I think it was its own thing. But
Yeah.
yeah, it was after the E3. It was in that late July, early August type of thing, it seems like.
Yeah. All right, let's move on from Ubisoft, but not from the PC. Swiss, you got some anti-cheat software announcements here from our good friends at Activision. Or Call of Duty. Let's say Call of Duty. We'll talk about
Call of
Activision later.
Duty.
Yeah.
Announcing Ricochet, which is I can't decide if I think it's a clever name or like completely like marketing like driven, but it's got like the bullet bouncing off like the Hollywood like steel logo, you know.
That's your bits bouncing off the hardware abstraction layer.
Yes. So they've announced that they've developed their own anti-cheat software, and actually in the blog post I was a little bit surprised. They gave more information than I was expecting in the press release. Like I was almost expecting, hey, we're doing this anti-cheat. We're gonna get those cheaters. Go Call of Duty, and they went a little bit farther than that. So it's going to be released alongside Call of Duty Vanguard and the Pacific update for Call of Duty Warzone. But it's like two-pronged. So they talk about a server side where they're going to use like machine learning and kind of, you know, that identify potential weirdness to focus in on. And they're going to do a client side, which I think is coming later. It seemed to imply that like it would be added to Call of Duty Vanguard at a later date, as well as Call of Duty Warzone. They said when it comes out, it's going to be required to play Call of Duty Warzone. Only for PC, kernel level, so it's going to have, like, the driver, it's going to, when you start the game, it's going to load, and they say when you end the game, it's going to turn off. So they did address, they attempted to address the privacy concerns and try to head those off at the pass. But yeah, it's coming. I mean, I don't know. Were people like? I feel is Call of Duty cheating like as big of a deal as some of these other games? Like, I mean, Destiny 2. I feel like everybody's always complaining about cheaters on the PC version of that.
Yeah, it's pretty bad on the PC at least. I think a little bit on the console, but I think it's more on the PC. But since it's intermittent, you got the cross-platform. You kind of see that coming through too. I think sometimes. So, but Game Logic, I thought you had put something up on Twitter, was it, or was it just in the chat regarding this?
Yeah, no, I did a lengthy, like, all-night post on Twitter about this.
Okay, so, Twitter. All right.
Yeah, and I have an announcement to make in conjunction with this. So the long post is about, and this is the problem, and the reason I think that they went into a lot of detail is because it was going to generate a lot of questions, because there is some very specific offense taken when kernel level anti-cheat is employed. It is so I don't know who else lived through it, but I lived through the Sony rootkit scandal of 2005. Right, this was a thing where you would put a Sony CD into your PC, it would automatically install a rootkit, which is a thing that is very similar to kernel level anti-cheat in that where it acts is at a layer at the very lowest levels of the operating system. And it actually has the ability to intervene with other commands that are coming from higher levels of the operating system, higher abstraction layers, the application layer, right? And intervene with commands that are trying to be directed to subvert or overcome things down, again, at the lower levels of the operating system, and in some cases, the actual hardware abstraction layer. And so it's a very invasive bit of code that's being injected. What it allows for, right, is for in some cases to interfere with actually intentional actions. And so someone else on Twitter mentioned that there are some hardware appliances that that disabled people utilize that operate down at that level because they actually have to intervene and change the behavior of the hardware to allow computers to be accessible to those people. And so this thing will sometimes interfere with those commands. It can sometimes wreak havoc with antivirus. So any other thing that operates down at that layer, it can cause interference with. In the worst case, it can cause a level of interference that somebody else can, right? If it disables something or stops something from functioning that should normally happen, that can then be exploited. And so some of these are, admittedly, doomsday and apocalypse and, oh my God, we're sitting on top of the hellmouth kind of predictions, right? But the fact of the matter is that it's a nasty, invasive thing that if you are of the mindset, you may just not want running around inside your computer, right, outside of your control. And Swiss mentioned a good thing. I think Activision has shown as much care and delicateness as this that they can, but there are some people who just find it offensive. Just like there are people who refuse to buy things from Amazon, and there are people who refuse to shop at Walmart, right? And I don't know, whatever else. People who refuse to buy Activision Blizzard games because of their lawsuit, right? Whatever. I have decided that I am one of those people. I don't want kernel-level anti-cheat on my computer systems, and so I have recently taken an action. Now, again, yes, admittedly, this is another scorched earth thing that I might just double back on in the next few months. I think I honestly won't. I am going through and scouring the list of, games with known kernel-level anti-cheat and saying I'm not playing those games and installing them on my system. Just because when I lived through the Sony rootkit scandal, I did have some systems that caused problems with, and I had systems that I had to reinstall and rebuild the operating system. And this was back in the day when I wasn't as meticulous about snapping images and maintaining like a configuration checklist so I could rebuild and restore a system back to whatever I was running on it, right? So I just don't, with my life now, I just don't need that interference and that happen chance for that to occur. And I don't need something bad to happen and then for them to be constantly trying to fix it, right? That blasted game already takes up 250 gigabytes, right, on your system. I don't need yet another highly complex thing that needs to be handled with a great deal of care being layered in on top of that. I think there should definitely be anti-cheat. That post on Twitter was really about, and it sounds like there's elements of it that they're doing, but my thing is look, I don't necessarily need you to boot the cheaters, right, out of the game. I need you to put enough analytics that you can see that it's happening, and then just disqualify the results, right, for those people, right? And don't punish the people who, if somebody gets 20 kills on me in a match because they're cheating, just don't hurt my stats because of those, right, because of those kills, right? Put monitoring around it, which it sounds like they're doing part of it, but then I don't understand why you need to be down at the kernel level if all you're doing is running analytics. All that doesn't make entire sense unless your intention is you're going to put something down there that's invasive enough that eventually you're going to get to a point where you're going to actually start zapping those things and preventing those cheats from actually subverting part of the operating system.
I totally that's 100% what the client side was for. So I mean they describe, we want to monitor what things are interfering, are working with Warzone or whatever, Vanguard at the time. I think it's hard from if I'm Call of Duty and I'm looking at it, and this is coming from, I don't play a lot of shooters. Sometimes I dip my toes in the water. If I play a game and I know I'm not that great, but I'm getting completely annihilated because of there's cheaters, it's very easy for me to drop the game entirely. And I can see Call of Duty being we don't want cheaters to push people away. So we got to do something. But no, I'm also somebody that is a little bit, is pretty self-conscious about what I have installed on my machine. I don't like stuff installed that I'm not using. I don't like stuff that I haven't, 100% vetted to be installed. So it's there's a little bit of rubs you the wrong way once you're getting that level granting that level of access. But
yeah, I'm just not gonna let a gaming company who, quite frankly, all due respect to people who work in that field, have not proven to me that they are the most attentive to matters of cybersecurity, put an agent on my machine that in some ways can directly subvert, said thing. So, it's going to be interesting. So for me, for now, Destiny 2 on PC gone, right? Call of Duty on PC gone. And the other thing, and this is, and some people will say, well, why are you kicking Call of Duty to the curb when they said you only needed to play Warzone? And this is the problem that we've been talking about and reporting on with Call of Duty since the merger happened, is I can't stink and tell how modularized that application stack actually is, right? They say you only need it to play Warzone, but here's the problem. Unless I'm mistaken, you still have to install Warzone in order to play multiplayer. So it may not be invoked, but for some reason they're tightly coupled together in their installation if you're going to play Modern Warfare multiplayer. And as far as I know, there's no way to not install that Warzone module in order to play multiplayer. So somewhere, right, in the deep levels in the back end, they are coupled together for some reason. And because it's all spaghetti and soup and you can't convey it to me and explain it to me, and I put time and skin on this, right, to try and pull this apart to figure out if there was a way that I could accommodate my sensibilities and pervasive offenses, right, and play the game, and I can't, right? And I'm somebody who spends a lot of time studying this stuff. So, transparent, yes. Fully transparent and clear, no.
Did they give any reason why they did it this way? Excuse me. Cough fit.
I mean, admittedly, I admit it's the only. It's kind of like aliens, right? How do you be sure? You take off from the planet and you nuke them from orbit, right? It's the only way to be sure, right? I admit there's no more effective way to stop roaches in their tracks, right? Other than to install this type of invasive interference screen. So I think I assume that's why they did it. And because they're at a popularity. And so if you look at the games that have it, there's this weird spectrum of games that nobody cares about, right? So I guess it's okay for them to install kernel level anti-cheat, or your biggest AAA properties where people are hyper concerned about cheating, like Destiny 2 and like Call of Duty. So I guess they're on that playing field, so they had to go this route.
Did you, like you said, you were kind of going through, you mentioned Destiny 2. Were there any other games you found out that had that kernel level that you actually had?
It's a mix, right, of my current triage, because what I'm finding the games that have it and the games that don't that I play. And so what I have determined at this point is Destiny 2 and Call of Duty have kernel level anti-cheat. I think they use two different types. One uses BattleEye, and of course these guys are going to use Ricochet. Past variants of Call of Duty have it on there. I don't have those memorized. The one thing that I did tread through is that World of Tanks and World of Warships does not have it on there. So I just, on those games, I just have to worry about the toxic communities.
That's all. That's easy mutable, though, I guess. All right. Stevie, any other thoughts on this one? All right. Well, let's get you on the mic. So from war on the ground to war in space, Stevie, got some Starfield news.
I guess this is news. So here we get, it is if you are following along with world building in Starfield. So this is Bethesda's game coming out next November, in theory, November of 2022. It tells you about that it happens it's in the small pocket of the Milky Way. It's called the Settled Systems. It goes through and introduces some of the factions, but we're getting concept art. These are sketches. This is art book level type of detail. This is not assets in the game yet. This is just it's flavor text, and really I'm trying to figure out why this is dropping down. They're slowly dripping some of this out here to just build things up. It also is dropping in the same week where the new Dune movie comes out, and one of the factions is the religious zealots House of Varun. So anytime you throw House of something in, you're in the Frank Herbert Dune franchise. otherwise, it's just like, hey, remember we got this coming on. It's a year and a half from now, so don't forget about us. But yeah, I guess that's the cynical way. If you are interested in it, it's great that they're building. It is a fresh world that they're building, right? And I think that is probably the distinction here. Is that when is the last time that Bethesda has done this, where you've been building off of Elder Scrolls, you've been building off of a Fallout franchise that they adopted from another developer when they did Fallout 3, the original Fallout and Fallout 2 had, so I think that in some ways that this is them being able to freshly build a world of their own.
Yeah, I was going to ask you because it seems kind of weird that this is like what the second or third trailer I'll say that they released. Obviously, yeah, like you said, with concept art and kind of renders and stuff. But I mean, usually they're like their last few games, they're kind of like, hey, they pretty much waited, for the last 3 to 6 months before the game actually released, and then they kind of like just exploded with all that stuff. Now it seems like they're kind of just slowly dripping stuff. I just thought it was kind of weird they're doing it. Like maybe just because of the kind of the bad press they've had lately with some of their games, the mainline games, that maybe they're trying to build a little bit of hype for this one a little bit earlier than normal, because it just seems kind of weird that they are doing this like this.
I mean, like
kind of like drip feed.
I mean, like you said, we got told about Fallout 76, right? The E3 before it released, like 3 to 4 months, 120 days, like before it came out.
Yeah.
I guess what this invokes is, and I'm amazed that leading on one of my old metaphor jokes, is that like, are they telling us what the Bethesda developers are having for lunch at this point, like they did for the Halo 2 marketing campaign? Like, so, and I mean, what the story evoked is, here now begins, right, the sad trail of the marketing campaign forever that leads to the cyberpunkish type hype. This game is at a high risk of likely being delayed, I feel like. There's a part of me that feels like this game wasn't supposed to come out in 2022, that it was a 2023 game, and I feel it in my bones that this is the wonderful falsehood of software engineering, where somebody said, oh yeah, since we don't have to develop for the PlayStation 5, we can certainly release the game 6 to 12 months earlier. And I'm like, that math doesn't always hunt, right? So I feel like I wonder if this is if they're setting themselves up for another Cyberpunk thing. And look, I love the tactical approach of the Microsoft Rolling Thunder marketing campaign. Like, that's been in place since Halo 2. Yes, it got a little bit off the rails with the Mountain Dew and the monster drinks and all whatever other sorts of craziness that were. There's a case study now that's kind of running around where people talk about like how that machine was kind of its own self-fulfilling prophecy and beast on rails, like separate from, I mean, on its own with its own force of momentum, besides just the game. But so I just feel like there's all this coiling up of, like DB said, like reporting on this really minor, like why not start this buzz after the VGAs, right? When everything for 2022 dies down and it comes your time to kind of step into the limelight. Yeah. Granted, again, you got this glut of games that's supposedly coming out in the spring that you got to tiptoe around, but I don't know. This is a little overly, I think.
Yeah, and as excited I'm excited for the game itself, just because it's a new IP from them. But I mean, like, I haven't even watched these trailers that they've released. I'm like, it's like way too early. Like, I mean, it's over a year away now, so it's just like, I'm sure when they they do the big reveal, probably E3, gameplay and all that stuff, I'll be all over it. But
the timing's a little strange. But I'm kind of curious. I don't remember which E3 it was, but I think it was you, Game Logic, that commented on the rabid, I don't know, zealotry of the Bethesda fan base at the particular, and maybe they're just trying to lean in and tap into that a little bit more. Like, hey, we haven't been taking advantage of our zealots quite as effectively as we could be.
And I can see some of that, right? Like, the only other game that Bethesda Studios had in the pipeline for the fall is already out, and it's past the kind of press cycle. So it's not like they're monopolizing anything else that is going to eat into their bottom line. So doing a little bit of drip feed doesn't hurt anything.
Yeah.
But I think we've also talked about this longer than the actual video is. So
It's the last thing I'll say is I will admit it's a weird problem for them to have, right? Where now, since the $7.5 billion acquisition, which I think we've found that it's actually a little bit more than $7.5 billion when you tally up all of like the side interest things that came along with it, but it's a weird thing to have for them to have to process, where they go, hey, we have potentially just killed like 50% of our fan base, right? Who are on PlayStation, who, unless they get on board a PC, you're probably not going to be buying and playing our games, right, ad hoc. So it's an interesting conundrum for them to have to pull apart, and I can see why we might experience some weirdisms between now and then as they approach this first launch under the first major launch, I think, under the Microsoft banner, versus things that were kind of already in pipeline and were already promised for PlayStation.
Yeah. All right, so let's jump off of Starfield. Let's jump back to Earth of sorts. Swiss, you got some God of War, 2018 God of War news.
Yes. Speaking of PC being an option for exclusive titles, God of War, the 2018 version, is coming to PC. January 14th, 2022. So just after the new year. It's not terribly surprising because we've been seeing these PlayStation tentpole titles being ported over. They've already done Horizon Zero Dawn. They did Days Gone. I wouldn't. Ghost of Tsushima, I don't know if they've announced that yet or not, but I wouldn't be surprised if that's next in the pipeline. But so the fact that it's being released, definitely feels like I think we wondered when they announced Horizon Zero Dawn, how much are they going to invest in this, and as they've continued to do it, we can see that they are. And that's the biggest thing I took from this, is what they've actually done with the game while they released it to PC. So they're not just doing like a straight up port. They mention in the blog post about the true 4K resolution. They're going to take advantage of NVIDIA DLSS on their RTX cards, and the reflex, which I haven't really read too much about, some sort of reaction thing. But the one that really caught my eye was they're offering 21:9 ultra widescreen support. So in a game though like God of War, I think that will be pretty fantastic, because I did like the level design and the vistas. It was definitely more constrained than a lot of your open world games were, but the Norse setting was really awesome, and I think having those like mountain vistas and everything is going to be really cool. So players that non-PlayStation gamers will have a chance to get into it. So it's already available on Steam and the Epic Game Store for pre-order.
Coming up fairly soon, January 14th, 2022. So that's not too long of a wait. I'm not a PC gamer, by any stretch of the imagination. A little bit here and there, but either you, DBQ, or I guess or Game Logic, any interest in this title coming to the PC?
I mean, I have it on PlayStation 4, so
I was say,
I think in some ways it's
Logic
great that they do. I'll be curious to see what other settings it does. Like, how is it going to have the enhancements that the PlayStation 5 version of God of War, right? That in terms of the additional graphics and the frame rate pieces, there was a patch that I think did that for if you're running it on PlayStation 5. So, but we'll see.
Game Logic, did you have it on PS4?
I do have it on PS4. If you bought the PS5, it's now in that goofy we love you. Here's your reward for being a return customer. Expanded PlayStation Plus pack thing. I assume that if it did get PlayStation 5 enhancements, that those are included as well. I'm not resistant to buying it again on PC, right? If the reviews are good and it warrants it. I never finished it on PlayStation, so playing it on PC would probably be a better experience because you would be able to scale, to the high heavens of infinity on frame rate, if you so chose, without having to monkey with the goofy HDMI 2.1 thing, which is still, I think, a logistics supply chain problem, and matter of choice and TV models that are available. So yeah, I might play. I think what I'm more curious about is, and I'm kind of interested to hear what DBQ and Swiss is like. So what is Sony doing? Like, is this the indicator, right? Is this the telegraph of the punch that says it's open season on PC, everything goes to PC, right? That's the native intent. That's why we acquired Nixxes, and now we're just tooling that agile release train so that everything that comes to PlayStation has a set, timeline, right? Kind of like the old movie goes to the theaters and then on a set timeline it releases to DVD, right? Where we're going to release all of our AAA games. Because the reason that I might be willing to buy it is because Sony got me, right? They spaced the release out enough that I don't feel guilty about the $60 that I expended buying it on PlayStation 4 2 years ago, and so I'm okay to pay it again on PC. But if their strategy is they release them too close, then that becomes a problem. But my question is this now open season, or are we still kind of waiting for the other shoe to drop every time a AAA title without clarity of, is The Last of Us 2 going to PC?
I'm going to say open season happened when they picked up Nixxes. I mean, I think that the writing was on the wall there. Like, the reason they acquired a studio that has been doing PC ports is that is now part of their investment package of those IPs.
I did look on the Steam page to see because I remember that story. I didn't notice Nixxes being involved. I don't know if they're involved in God of War. I should say that. But yeah, I agree. I think it's open season, and I think it makes sense. It's like they're putting it up there on Steam for $50. It's a 2-year-old game, and potentially reaching a new audience and getting pretty much full price for an experience. Why not?
Does the Steam page say Sony Santa Monica, or does it just say Sony Interactive Entertainment?
It said the developer was Santa Monica, and it said the publisher was Sony Mobile or something. Yeah. Well,
I mean, Nixxes could definitely still be a support studio, right? That helps. I mean, or they could have been renamed and rebadged to whatever that Sony Mobile thing is. Who knows really what they're called now? Yeah, no, that's interesting. I also wonder if what's the name of the studio they just acquired that's historically the remake studio?
Blue Point.
Yeah, so I'd be interested to see if there's a day where we get Sony gives the IP to Blue Point, they do the remaster remake, it comes out on PlayStation, and then it's handed off to Nixxes for them to port it over to PC, and then they just have the whole spectrum from left to right to increase their back catalog.
They did say when they acquired Blue Point, they did say that they're working on a brand new IP. So they might be letting Blue Point fly off the branch, whatever it is that birdies do.
I feel like from the comments from that CEO, it sounds like there was a very deliberate plan for that studio's evolution, but I didn't feel like what I heard from that was that they would be leaving the remake remaster capability behind, and it feels like to properly shore up their pipeline, they would want to get to a point where they get this new IP, let's call it to the 50% point of development, and then they start like the next remake, right? And then it's kind of this TikTok thing that they do. I don't know. Yeah, so it'll be interesting to see how Sony puts this all together.
And all of these ports they've done to the PC, these have been like years after the game's released, right? They're not doing it like Microsoft where it's like day and date, right?
No.
Do you see a day where they start doing that, or are they more like we're going to wait a couple years and let this fill a PS5 now? So
Well, the thing I was going to mention is that I temporarily forgot is so we also have these recent comments by Jim Ryan, who's said that he is somewhat saddened or whatever I think was his verbiage about like that he only addresses like a certain number, like 140 million players or whatever on the market, right? And that there are a billion other gamers, right, that he's not accessing or don't have the opportunity to play, Sony Interactive Entertainment titles. We don't really know what that means. I don't believe that porting it to PC covers down on that base, right? Because I forget what it was. Because the PC gaming market is something like, I want to say it's something that it roughly equates to the aggregate of the PlayStation, Microsoft, and PlayStation, Xbox, and Switch markets. That it's like 220 million like PC players or something like that, or maybe it's half that, but it's not anywhere near like the billion, right? It's just like roughly the same size as the market that he's addressing now. So I don't really know how that moves the ball on that topic. So there's got to be something else that he means by that besides just porting stuff to PC, and I guess we don't know what that is just yet.
Mobile games, maybe. I mean, it's a big market out there.
Yeah. I don't know.
Do they make mobile games, Sony? Like, have they ever done anything with the like? Well, let me say it this way: have they done anything like one of their major franchises or sort of franchises?
I want to say, remember there was that goofy PlayStation phone.
There was, right, the Sony Ericsson, yes,
yeah,
PlayStation phone. There was a Ratchet and Clank Android and iOS game at one point in time, kind of like a Temple Run, but that's early mobile stuff. So
yeah, it's possible he's talking about that. Well, we'll see. I played the earlier God of Wars, at least the first couple, and I'd be interested to play some of these newer ones. Did they give or I wouldn't say a date, but a release window for Ragnarok? Is this kind of hyping up maybe for that game? Like, kind of, hey, remember God of War? And then, here, boom, we're going to give you the PS5, a new one. I don't know if there's been a release date yet.
I'm pretty sure it's 2022, but...
Is it 2020? Okay.
That's all it is. Yeah, but I think it'd be like late 2022. I think the early is going to be for Horizon Zero Dawn sequel.
Oh, yeah.
I think is supposed to be in the spring, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I forgot about that.
Yeah, it's scheduled for February right now.
Yeah.
Whether it hits that or not is a whole different.
All right. So let's jump over to Nintendo. I haven't really talked about them much. Game Logic, you got some news on their expansion of their online service.
Yeah. And just before I step onto that, let me not have whatever the Horizon. I constantly forget the title. Let me not have the Horizon Zero Dawn sequel maligned by my statement that this glut of games in February, March is a fantasy. Horizon Zero Dawn actually released in that timeline, I think in March, the year that it came out.
It released late February because a few weeks later was when the Switch released with Zelda Breath of the Wild.
Okay.
So that was like a good...
Right. So those were the three titles that actually made that was Resident Evil 7, which I think released early February, Horizon Zero Dawn, and Breath of the Wild. So I believe that game will come out. The rest of all that stuff is highly subject to be delayed, I think. Anyway, let's talk about Nintendo Switch Online. And actually, as I reread this article, I will again go back to, I don't know that everybody has a reason to really be so offended as they were when this news dropped. So the news, and I am definitely open to you guys jumping in and helping out with this, because as usual, Nintendo online services are a thing to be pulled apart, and I can definitely see how it takes like 5 or 6 people to get it right. But we had gotten news, I think at the last Direct, about this expansion pack that was coming, and an enhancement to the online service. I don't think at the time we maybe understood it or thought about it as an enhancement, even though it had the label expansion pack. And so these are the Nintendo 64 titles, and the thing that I got super excited about out of the last Direct, one of the few Directs that has caused me to be excited in the last 4 years, about the Sega Genesis titles that are coming. We have some of them named. Unfortunately, that list of names does not include Vector Man, which was the real thing that I was looking forward to. But there is Golden Axe, Contra Hardcore, Gunstar Heroes, Shinobi, which is the title that I'm most excited about that's coming down the road. But in addition to this, you will also get access to the Animal Crossing expansion pack, which interestingly enough, might just be the thing that pulls me over the edge and makes me start playing Animal Crossing. The price for the expansion pack is $50 for a year. Now the way
hold on.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Did you say you're gonna maybe buy Animal Crossing?
I may.
Okay.
I may. Why not? Right.
I mean, if it comes with the pack, sure.
Right. I mean, the worst thing I could do is not play it. So.
Yeah. It'll just be another game in the backlog.
Yeah, it'll be something to while some time away with, perchance. But so the way I understand it, the way this pricing is broken down on this article, which is on EGM now, which I think came from Swiss, that is the price for Nintendo Switch Online, the expansion pack, which here is listed as a discrete service. And so what it sounds like is that if you want to continue paying for Nintendo Switch Online at your $20 per year, I think you still can. If you want access to the expansion pack, which sounds like a discrete add-on service, another tier, if I think about this like Xbox Live plus Game Pass, where I could just pay for Xbox Live at a reduced price, then you could do that. Or you can get the family account, which is $80 for 12 months, and it says it covers 8 accounts. And DBQ and Swiss, since I think you guys have family accounts, you can let me know if that's accurate or not.
Yeah, Family Pass or the family account is $35 currently. Yeah. And so this is, you can still just purchase the family, you don't need to purchase the add-on. It's not like it's jumping everybody's price. I think it is an optional piece. And I'll be very curious to see our discussion on this, right? Because I think that this is, if the expansion content for Animal Crossing is really something that you want, that's a standalone price of $25. Granted, that's a one-time purchase, not a license to play it during the year that you're paying $50 for the expansion pass, which is a whole different conversation, but is not drastically different than a number of other services that are the same way. But at that point, then the expansion pass, the retro content of an N64 and Genesis games are really only additional $25 if you place the $25 value on the Animal Crossing content. If you're not here for the Animal Crossing content, I think that is where you saw the backlash, was kind of the extent of the fact that this jumps the price more than double what the baseline price is right now. And so,
well, so let me double talk back through the math. So if you put value on the Animal Crossing pack, then really your only additional cost for the N64 and Sega content is an additional $5, right? So
if you put value on to roll back to what you were saying, it is currently you're saying that the individual year pass is
$20.
How much? $20, right?
Which gets you the NES and the Super NES content.
Right.
And the ability to play competitive, like online games.
And the online piece, yeah.
And a handful maybe of free games. Tetris. There's that Kirby game from Nintendo. Just Nintendo.
Mario 35.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, you can't. I don't think you can play that anymore.
You can't get that, but
I think they have a few other games.
Yeah.
They'll do that every once in a while.
Yes, free new games, right? I mean, because they're all at the cost of the subscription. There's no additional cost, and for that you get a back catalog of games that are ported forward, and you get some new titles that implement some old IP in entirely new ways.
Right.
Yes. So again, if you are purchasing an individual pass, and you're looking at either $20 or $50 for the expansion pass, that yes, if you are placing value on the Animal Crossing expansion, yes, then you are looking at, there's $45 and you only have 5 more to go. I think the piece that probably stood out more for people is that the jump of from 35 to 80 for a family pass more than the jump of, because in some ways the jump of 20 to 50 still keeps it somewhat under that price point of a PlayStation Plus year or something like that.
I mean, I think I'm not saying that. Maybe I did say exactly this, but I didn't mean to say that people didn't have a valid reason to be offended. Maybe that's what I just said. I didn't really intend to. I feel like I think what I was trying to convey is I think the why of people got offended maybe wasn't quite one-to-one with a more discrete understanding of how these things were packaged and tiered. In like you said, I don't think that they're that different really from other services. I think the big thing that people are really offended by is, I will admit, this is a Nintendo hustle, right? They got us in at $20, and for years we were like, oh, this is great. Nintendo's the greatest gaming company in the world. They're charging us the lowest price that any of these console manufacturers do to gain access to this online store that has these offerings. And they never indicated in any way any mention of any type of price increase that would be anything other than like a Netflix periodically like price hike due to service charges. So I think that was the wallabanger, was people heard the notion of the expansion pack content at the Nintendo Direct, and we all just assumed that there wouldn't be some significant price increase, and we're hoping that it was, if there was a price increase, it was like $5 or something. I think yeah, go ahead.
I was gonna say, like, I'm one of them that it was like super excited, and now I'm not excited at all, because it's like we've been conditioned. So I view paying the $35 for the family plan as the ability for my kids to play like Mario Kart and Splatoon and everything online. Like that's why I'm paying for it. The SNES and NES games were gravy. Okay, it's like what they should have done to condition, like, and this is complete put off because now we're paying like double for more gravy. And it's like they should have maybe had, okay, you can get your NES and SNES stuff for an additional $10, whatever. And it would have at least got us like, okay, how much do I want to value having these retro games? Having like these two consoles be like, I view it as free. It's like I'm not paying for the NES. I'm paying for the online services, and they put it at a price point where that's what you're paying for. It's hard for me to fathom why the N64 and the Sega Genesis represent like a doubling of the price. I just don't. The value is like completely diverged, and I don't get it.
Yeah, it's a very super interesting business model use case to pull apart. Because I think part of what's caught up in here is that there are things, you used a great term using that term, conditioning. I feel like there are things of value in the Nintendo service stack that haven't really been messaged and haven't really been conveyed and aren't really at the top of people's minds. I look at this description and I think now, right, that I do value it, and I'm like, yeah, but if somebody didn't mention it, I would think that, right, and the thing that is brought to the fore that I realize and put value on now is, oh yeah, each of these games that's been brought forward and ported forward has been modernized into the 21st century, right? The resolution's been upgraded. You can save and suspend the games, right? You can pause the games. You can get back, right? So they're not like the old, like, you shut the console down and the thing goes away, right? There's some modernization capability there that makes it more akin to a modern gaming experience with that retro content. And I feel like that's of some value. I don't know that it's an additional $30, but so yeah, there's a problem. And I will also readily agree with, there's also a problem where I was halfway down the hill of saying, yeah, sure, I'm going to pay the extra $50, but now what I remember that I'm offended by is, but I don't know that I'm paying what to me is still, even though it's less than Xbox Live and PlayStation Plus, I still feel like it at $50 pushes it into that similar to pricing tier. And I don't know that I'm paying you $50 for your console that can't use a headset and where I have to do online comms still over my mobile phone. Like, there's just a certain amount of like minimum professionalism that I expect from a service that I pay into at that tier. So I don't know if that hits it. If you add more Sega Genesis titles in the future that hit right into my nostalgia, I could probably see onboarding then, maybe later. The other thing, the last thing I'll say, the other thing that we're obviously now waiting to see is, okay, when they add GameCube games to the service, are they going to price hike it again?
Now you just give them another idea. No, but I think your question about when you jump in on this is a good one, and this is one I've had with my family of Nintendo fans and retro game fans. Like, yeah, this would be really fun. Is it $50 worth when we already own these systems and the minis and the compilations that came out on PlayStation 3 and on Switch already? But I think in a year from now, if they've been adding things as they provide and are telegraphing that they're going to, if this roster is significantly larger or a little more robust, there probably is value there. I think it's probably a harder sell now than it might be in a year from now. But that also assumes, and this is where the track record piece comes in, is that their drip feed of NES and SNES games on the service has been intermittent, infrequent, and not something that is not the schedule of the Wii Virtual Console circa 2007.
Yeah, I have liked what they've dropped, but the drops have not been frequent enough. I think another piece in here is like, we might clamor for more transparency on what the continuity model is here, right? So you're asking me to onboard to this service, which is tightly coupled, as it has been every time with the Nintendo console, and that's the thing that's frustrating, is that these services are tightly coupled to the SKU, to the hardware SKU, and then they change right when the hardware shifts, which is not the same as it is for PlayStation and Xbox. And so the question is, you're asking me to onboard with this price hike at the end of 2021. Now I'm going into, the 5th, 6th year of the Nintendo Switch's life cycle, and I'm like, this can't continue. This cannot abide, sir. Right? Like, so what's going to happen to my service that I've onboarded with, like, a year from now when you announce whatever the heck it is that you're going to announce is the next thing coming?
You kind of in a tangential way, you addressed a point that I was thinking about, which is, I hate subscription services when it comes to stuff like this. I want to either own the content or just give it to me as gravy, but I'm paying for the service of being able to access the online. Why can't I buy Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time for the N64 and like pay $9.99 or $4.99 to own it? But then, like you said, now we're looking into the tying it to the SKU piece, and if I buy it for the Switch, it's not going to carry over.
Right, you're going to have to pay for it again.
Yeah.
And the reason is because Nintendo is going to do what Nintendo going to do, right? Because they know that people are going to re-up again for the subscription service for the next store thing that they instantiate. And I mean, and the sad truth of the matter is, right, is I paid for whatever I paid for whatever that store thing was on the 3DS, and I put my 3DS like in a box in the utility room, and that's where that content is locked. Right? The fact that I paid for it doesn't make it available to me, right, when the hardware shifted. So, and we are probably, as DBQ said, right, here's where the history of past behavior represents itself. We will probably be asked to do yet again the same thing. It's just they should just they should just allow you to subscribe to a perpetual subscription for Nintendo, and just say, yeah, I'm just going to pay that for the rest of my life, because that's essentially what they ask you to do each time.
So I've been unusually quiet here because this whole thing is messed up if you think about it. Because you're talking about conditioning and the subscription services. So it's been what, 5 years? It'll be 6 years next year, I believe. First year it came out, everything was free, right? the online system, everything. You can just do whatever you want. About a year later, and then they started the subscription service. The $20, which is I don't know. That was kind of weird, but I mean, at $20, okay, it's not bad. We go like what 3 or 4 years now. People have been clamoring for Nintendo 64 and GameCube, and to be honest, I don't think we'll ever see GameCube on this system at least, or maybe the Switch Pro or whatever they call the next system. I don't think it'll ever come out on here because it took this long just to get the 64 content. I think they've been clamoring for that since even the original Wii, and not and obviously the Wii U when that came out. Now you got the subscription pack. I've done the same thing both Gascles and Swiss has done. Like, hey, Gascles is actually thinking of upping his subscription. You pay for the regular subscription now, right? I guess Game Logic. He's thinking of getting the expansion.
I kind of do. I took that. What was the Amazon deal last year, DBQ, where you got like a reduced price or a free year or something like that.
Oh yeah, I think that was from Prime. Maybe was
Yeah.
that from Twitch? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then I have Swiss. He's like, I'm not gonna, probably not gonna pay for the the new expansion and all that. Possibly, I don't know. You didn't directly say you're not going to, but it sounds like you're not. But in the end, I'm just gonna pay for it because that's what I do. This is Nintendo. I think that's what everybody does. After all this, all the clamoring, I'm not even talking about in this show. Like, I saw everything online. They're like, yeah, I'm just gonna buy it anyways. And to be honest, I mean, $50 for the single subscription for 12 months, for a year, it's not too bad. It's still lower than most stuff. And even $80 is not, it's still technically lower than most other services. But I mean, for me, I do see value for this because obviously Genesis. I mean, I grew up more Nintendo, but Genesis is, I had friends and I think later on I got my own at some point, or maybe my brother or whatever. He got one, so I was able to play those games. So some of these like Streets of Rage and Golden Axe and Echo, I actually really liked Echo back in the day. So I'm excited for those. Nintendo 64, obviously, since I've been a Nintendo person this whole time, I'm excited to get those games. And I haven't played a lot of these games in a long time, or some of them I don't think I've ever played at all. But then there's the Animal Crossing expansion that you get with this, and that's like pretty much a given for me because I've been pretty much an Animal Crossing person this whole time, for the last couple of years, or it'll be a couple of years now. And I see the value there, at least for me, and I've seen that too. Like a lot of people, a lot of the forums and just other Discord servers that I'm on, they're like, oh, blah, blah, blah. But you know what? I do want that Animal Crossing, DLC and a little bit of more info on that. If you do happen to let your subscription wane or you just cancel it, whatever, you don't have access to that island that you'll get, the Happy Home Paradise DLC. But some of the the items and some of the things you kind of unlock, you do get to keep that stuff. So they're not totally locking you out of that DLC, once the subscription lapses. So that'll be nice. It'll be interesting to see though once they flip subscriptions onto whatever they go to next. How's that going to work? Like, I'm assuming it's just going to be tied to the Switch at that point. So we'll see.
That Animal Crossing thing, I don't know if that's all altruism on Nintendo's part, because they've done some stupid stuff. Like my wife Vela was like a high level Splatoon player. Like she got up to like A or A+ rank or whatever.
Nice.
We had to get our Switch fixed, and then so we got it sent to Nintendo, and it came back, and technically it was a different one. And everything was completely wiped for Splatoon. They do not store that content in the cloud. You talk about it being tied to the machine. Your Splatoon progression is tied to your specific Switch. So maybe it was just like, well, we can't figure out how to get this Animal Crossing stuff. So if they turn off their thing, well, I don't know. It's still on the memory card. We'll say they get to keep it, and it's because we're not good programmers.
Yeah, I mean that was evident. That was obvious when they finally did get the cloud backup stuff. They mentioned, hey, Pokemon's not going to be on there, which was weird. Splatoon's not going to be on there. That was super weird. Like, well, how do you not have Splatoon save data like up on the cloud? But it's just
how much of Animal Crossing is up there? Do you know?
Well, they finally added it onto the game. I think just this past year, maybe, or even the end of last year, where they actually do have like the whole game saves up to the cloud, I believe. So if you do happen to like lose your system, you should be able to pull it all back down.
Okay.
As far as I know, yeah. So that was, but another thing too, like this whole thing, the whole expansion pack. Yeah, they announced it back on the direct, but and they said, hey, we're going to talk about it more, along pricing and release date and all that at a later date. They tagged this. Basically, this came out at the end of the Animal Crossing direct. I don't know. I think that's a pretty smart move. Like, hey, we got all this stuff. This Animal Crossing. We haven't done anything in a while. We got all this free content now. We got DLC. It's paid, but we got still all the free content is actually pretty substantial too. But then, at the end, oh hey, expansion pass. It'll come on that. Here's the pricing. Boom. That was it. like cut. Like we're done. So I think that was a pretty smart move on their part to kind of tag it on the end of the wholesome direct of Nintendo of Animal Crossing. So, but any other comments on this one? I think we've kind of
We'll
beat
see.
this one to death.
I think my family is about to get Animal Crossing. I was told by a relative not to purchase it and that it might be coming. So we'll see if my opinion changes after I get my hands on that particular title.
All right. Yeah, we'll see. You never played any of the others? Any of the previous games?
Nope.
Okay. So it's brand new. So it's a good game to start out, actually. All right, so let's jump through some of these other stories real quick. Next up for me, I believe, is Infinity Ward. They are opening a brand new studio in Texas, Austin, Texas, and I didn't realize they had all these other studios kind of around the world. They have one in Poland, Mexico, and then they have the one in Austin, and then they have the corporate headquarters in California. And this is from videogameschronicle.com. They're going to be opening a brand new studio to help them, supposedly, in this kind of speculation, I think, but probably is going to happen. Working on their sequel to Modern Warfare, and that was back in 2019. I didn't play that original one, or I didn't play that one, I should say. And it says they're hiring for all positions, so I don't. I mean, I guess they could be like working on this game already, assuming it is the sequel to Modern Warfare. But I don't see them how they could like pull this off at first when I was reading this article. But then I realized at the end of the article they mentioned how Activision has said, pretty much all studios, and not just like Call of Duty studios, but all studios in Activision are actually actively working on the Call of Duties. So, I mean, I guess they can pull it off. That they'll have the sequel ready by the time 2022 comes around.
Yeah, I don't think the new studio will be the lead studio for this title. I assume
support.
Yeah. I mean, maybe more than just support, but maybe handling, Yeah, but yes, maybe a support studio this first time out of the hopper. I assume that this title has been being worked on since Modern Warfare came out in 2019, since they're on 3-year cycles. I think they got somebody got an extra year out of the whole thing by virtue of Treyarch taking 2 turns in the hopper. So,
Who got bumped last year? Was that Sledgehammer or was that Infinity Ward? No, I think it was Sledgehammer.
Sledgehammer, yeah.
It's Sledgehammer. Okay. Yep.
So that's the Vanguard's their game for this year. So I guess I guess you're right. Yeah, Infinity Ward could have spun this up. Brand new studio. Any other comments on that one as we move along here? All right, so this was a game, and this is coming from Kotaku.com, which I didn't even realize that actually already came out. I'm talking about Aliens Fireteam Elite. It's kind of a.
I didn't even realize it came out. I talked about it on the show like a month ago, and I said,
maybe, but I didn't even.
You were on the show.
I'm probably was.
That's how much people remember this game. Is that
that's right?
Even us, we're not paying attention to this game, even when you've played it and talked about it.
Well, I never played it, so I mean that'd be really bad if I don't remember even playing the game. But what they're talking about in the article, this came out 55 days ago. And basically the player base, at least on PC, I think they're just talking about Steam here, has pretty much dropped from 10, we'll say 15,000 at its peak, as it's barely 1,000 players now. going on consecutively, week to week. And this is three. I think it was a 3 or is it 4-man team? It looks like a 3.
It's a 3-man team. Yep.
Yeah, 3-man. So it just kind of horde. Kind of like Left 4 Dead and Back 4 Blood. You kind of just you against the horde, going through the different stages. And so Back 4 Blood is one of the reasons they kind of give this was the follow up more or less to the Left 4 Dead series because it's the same studios. But they also mentioned how kind of the content just kind of dried up basically. Like they had a big update back in September. With a new, so there's different classes, just in kind of how all these games kind of work. So there's a new class that they added and levels and stuff. You can get loot and all that, but kind of after that, it was kind of just pretty much hey, here's some bug fixes, and we're not really doing anything else. So I just thought it was kind of interesting. It was interesting because I didn't realize the game came out, so I was like, okay. And when it first came out, I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. But then, even before the game came out, back, when it was announced, I heard about Back 4 Blood too. And I was like, oh, that's coming out not too long afterwards. And it's like, I'll just wait for that. And that seems to be, pretty much going gangbusters more or less right now. So, did you continue playing that game?
I played it maybe once or twice more.
Yeah.
It's not bad. It's nothing special. It's a small team. It's a AA game. It's not a huge team. It's not designed as a live service type of thing. So the fact that there's not any new content really doesn't surprise me. I think when we talked about it in September, I said, if you have an affinity to the franchise, wait for the holidays and it's probably going to be $20. And it's, if you've got some friends that like that type of game, you could have $20 worth of fun with people in it. As a solo player, as a single player game, not so much.
Yeah, and they mentioned how it got good reviews, and even the player base liked it for what it was, but it just kind of died off.
So my tail of the tape on this is, I feel like this is why the dialogue about games in the gaming community that are in this ilk needs to change. I think there's a lot of cheerleading and rah-rahing about these games that exist in their initial impression in the honeymoon time phase in their first month of release. And I think I've seen this for Alien Fireteam Elite. I've seen this for Knockout City. And I'm like, your overjoyed happiness about the game in the first 30 days means nothing. What's important, as I always get on my religious platform about, same thing about hardware reviews, these media journalists, tech journalists who grab a phone and use it for 7 days and then come out with their review and wipe their hands and say that's my impression of the phone. It doesn't matter. What matters is what people are doing with this content in this title 3, 4, 6, 12 months down the road, and that needs to be the discourse. Fine to talk about your initial impressions, but stop talking about these games being a win until you have apex level longevity of performance. Knockout City has even fewer concurrent players than this, right? They're down to 226 people playing at any time, and only barely made it to a third of the peak of this game. And there were people rallying around that title as game of the year, and the way back for EA, and this is how EA is going to earn back its I'm like, EA's not going to earn back their moxie until they prove themselves with what they do with Battlefield 2042. These singular anecdotal ties to mini releases being these hand wavy expressions of overwhelming moments of inertia in the industry need to be tamped down a little bit, right, with a little bit of restraint to kind of put them at a commensurate level with what they really mean, right? And the truth is, you don't know and you don't see what a game's really going to do and be about until you have, right, the long tail of a Rainbow Six Siege, right, to see what the game's really going to do.
Yeah, I do still play Knockout City every so often, not as much as I did, like you mentioned, but it's just, I think the thing of it is too is just there's just so many games out nowadays. It's just okay, I can play this for a few minutes or a half hour and I get enjoyment out of it, but then oh hey, here's the new shiny, so you got to jump over onto that one.
It's what I always point back to, what I keep what I've been talking about these these 4-player, 3-player co-op games, right? That there's currently like we're heading towards a glut of these things. Like they've gotta differentiate, and they've got to bring some. And like this has some richness in it, some good things, right? Progression system, like yada yada. Like, but look, if everybody's coming out with a 4-person co-op shooter that has progression system in it and things that you retain and persistent progression, then you got to do something different. Like, is the Back 4 Blood card system enough? I don't know, because we don't know that it has a big enough impact and creates enough of a feel, and really that there's enough differentiation, right, depending on how you stack your cards. From the beta and maybe some of your guys' initial impressions, it seems like I don't know that I can't complete a thing without becoming a master of the cards, right? So I don't know. Games need a longer tail time to marinate before people make wide sweeping judgments and claims about what impact the game has on the industry or a given publisher.
And I mean, and in this case too, it could have been because of the IP ahead behind it. It's the Aliens franchise, so everyone's kind of hyped about it. And like, hey, this is probably gonna be great. And it did, like I said, it did get reviews and previews and all that. But it's if you don't get the content there, I mean, you're gonna die out eventually.
Yeah. It's like you said, it's
sooner than later.
It's a competitive space, right? A lot of stuff coming out of similar ilk, and people got to make choices.
Yeah. All right, DB, got some courtroom news here, or some well, I guess not courtroom news this time.
Not so much. I mean, right, but this
No.
it would not be
Activision.
It would not be an E2KG show if we were not following some type of legal drama. Whether this is now that Apple and Epic has settled for now, we have been turning our attention toward Activision Blizzard, whether it's versus the state of California or various other federal agencies. But this one is not so much about the lawsuits. This is really the piece here that stands out to me is the HR speak and the very specific word choices that this, so the story here is that Activision Blizzard has come out and said that over 20 employees have exited. Exited is the word that they use. So in recent months, here's the quote coming out of the executive vice president for corporate affairs. In recent months, we have received increased reports through various reporting channels. People are bringing to light concerns. But that in connection with these various resolved reports, more than 20 individuals have exited Activision Blizzard, and more than 20 individuals face other types of disciplinary action. So the exited part, from somebody who has worked with HR in a variety of different capacities, this is not people that have been let go. This is not people that have been terminated. These are not people, this is an exited means that it is some combination of a variety of terms. Like it can be somebody who has been deliberately let go, or it could also be somebody who has chosen to move on, but maybe they were encouraged to move on before information came out. Right? Like it basically catches everything without necessarily having to say what direct action was taken. That people have left, that means something has happened, but not necessarily that there was disciplinary action involved with all 20 of those individuals. That's how I read this from an HR speak aspect. Other than that, I don't know that there's much of a story here. I mean, I think what it is it's a good PR spin of, hey, we haven't been able to catch a break. Look, there are things happening. We have people who have left the company. We are taking disciplinary actions on others. I think that it is a company who is trying to get out in front of things that they have not necessarily been able to get out in front of.
Yeah, just trying to, hey, we're doing stuff. This is what we've done.
Of course, the what we worry about is the other news story that we see trending kind of in the same space, which is about at Ubisoft, how there was this fear that there would be a lot of hand waving and claims to taking progressive action, but at the end of the day, a few people were shuffled out the door, and then things just went back to the norm. So that's what people are worried about here too, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, it looks like they're doing, they're doing stuff's happening. People are getting disciplined and people are exiting. But we'll see. Well, I'm sure. I don't think a week's gone by where we haven't talked about something here.
I mean, so the exiting piece, this is where I don't want to give them credit on exiting people, because people have also exited the company because of the bad things that have been happening in the toxic work environment, and they are leaving the company to go work someplace else or making some of those choices.
Yeah.
But by the language, they also get counted because they've exited as well.
Yeah, that was. I mean, I hate to say it, that was kind of my first thought. Like, who is this that's exiting? Like, is it the actual people that did something wrong, or is it other people that unfortunately had something happen to them, and they're just like, you know what, I'm just out of here. I'm getting out of here. So,
Yeah.
like,
I will say the specific quote in here was that there are 20 people who have exited because of resolved reports. So they were in there's some tangential, at least, connection to the ongoing allegations. Now, just as DB said, right, those that you could very well have like a VP who literally, an HR person said one thing to them and said, hey, we have this report. Do you really want us to pull this thread? No, you know what? I was planning on leaving anyway. Not a big deal. I'll talk to you guys. Here's my 2 weeks notice. No worries. Yeah. Right? Because there are all these things attached to, you don't want to sully, there may be political reasons to not sully the person's name and drag them through the mud. Maybe they have something on Activision, right, that can make things worse for them. And so there's this congenial agreement for everybody to part ways and go about their business. So, like DB said, there's still some, there may still be some shady deals going on, but at least the statement is that it's all in the interest of, moving the ball forward. But like DB said, I'm sure, there are tons of other people who are like, I've had enough of this and I'm out of here, who should have been protected and should have been able to continue to work at Activision under better working conditions.
Yeah, definitely. All right, Game Logic. Let's keep you on the mic. Wrap us up here. We have some FIFA news, some EA Sports FIFA news.
Yeah, so I'm probably going to sprinkle a bunch of conjecture and speculation through this, but I think, and part of the problem with this is news articles came out at the same time and after this, and I'm not sure we tracked all of them down, but going over the last couple of weeks, there has been this spat that's been developing between FIFA and EA, and I think the first thing that we heard was that EA was considering about changing the name of the FIFA franchise to something other than FIFA. I think shortly thereafter, we got then news that, oh, by the way, FIFA is trying to and wants to ratchet up the licensing fees associated with EA, and I think thereafter we got more firm confirmation that EA is definitely renaming the franchise and is not going to so tightly couple it to the FIFA series. I think this is the name that they're pursuing, which is EA Sports FC, which I think means EA Sports Football Club.
That's how I read that as well, yeah.
Okay. So, and I think we talked about this a couple weeks ago too, maybe when this was first dropping, but, the tale of the tape is that, soccer around the world is not just FIFA. FIFA is the premier level, but there are tons of, country level, state level, municipal level clubs. Again, if you watch Ted Lasso, you understand some of that, right? But there are tons of local, teams that play in these lower level leagues that people have just as much of a fervor and tight, nostalgia to, as well as like the big, FIFA level teams that we know around the world. And there's just all this trading and soccer player movement back and forth. I know because I played a little bit of FIFA where, somebody can get loaned from a lower level club up to a higher level club, and there's some, handshaking and money exchange and all that kind of stuff. I still go with the speculation that I think this was in addition to the increased licensing fees, there was also some discussion and maneuvering at EA to start to figure out ways to insulate themselves, not only against the higher costs, but against this notion of, and I don't know what FIFA would have done in terms of swerving EA around the same way that the Major League Baseball did with Sony, but this also may have been to kind of buffer and hedge themselves against the license holder kind of stepping into the gaming space and kind of telling them, EA, what they wanted to do with the license. There may have also been plans for FIFA to no longer make the license exclusive. And so, EA seems like they made the tactical and strategic decision that, hey, the world of soccer is not solely FIFA and we'll be fine without it, and has made that positive step down that path. Positive not necessarily meaning that I'm judging the decision as being favorable, but positive in that it's a conscious, deliberate action that they have taken, not so much leaving it to chance.
So right now in the FIFA games, do you see those other clubs and it's just not mentioned? Okay, I just want to make sure. That's what I kind of figured when you were talking, but I wasn't sure.
Yeah, I think when we talked about this thread the first time, I think there's like over 300 clubs licensed throughout the FIFA game, and yeah, you can definitely choose to play like either the Premier League or these Dust Bowl level, soccer clubs. You could choose to play off the internet, not play on the international stage and play one of these lower level clubs. Yeah. And it's got all the leagues and the rankings and I guess
regional stuff.
Yep. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Swisser, DB, got any comments on that? Any big arguments on why they shouldn't or shouldn't change the name? All right. So, Game Logic, were you gonna have something else? I thought you were gonna say something.
No, I was just gonna say I think I'm the only E2KGer who plays the FIFA series.
Yeah, I've dabbled a little bit, but
GB,
I've not played much.
Yeah, I've never. Mario Strikers is about as close to soccer as I've gotten. So, although it's EA. EA is on Game Pass now. I could always bring it down and give it a try. So maybe I'll do that one day. Just to. No, I've played soccer games in the past too, but I don't think I've ever played a 3D soccer game. It's probably back in the 16-bit days. So we'll see. We'll see what I'll jump into it. All right, so let's wrap it up. I had one more thing about Grand Theft Auto Trilogy. I think that's pretty much been leaked for the last month or two, so that's coming out officially. But next week will be our GX show, and as always, we have our picks plays. So this week, our GX show will be right before Halloween. So we've done our picks plays to kind of wrap around that theme. So we're going to be playing a spooky game of a sort. So if it's either in your backlog or one of the cheapy or freebie games that sometimes get released out there. So we got Stub the Zombies came out on Epic Games. I don't know if that's still out there for free or not. But there's all kinds of sales going on: Xbox, PSN, probably Nintendo, other subscription services. Check out a game and come back and let us know what you've picked. It could be, you can be straight up horror. Something like I was gonna pick The Medium, which is kind of horrorish. Kind of a thriller from what I was playing. But I think I'm going to actually switch. And even though I'm not going to be on the show next week, I'm switching over to The Walking Dead Saints and Sinners, which is on the Oculus Quest 2. I think on the original Oculus Quest 2 also, or the original Oculus Quest also. So I just bought a bundle of games and that was one of them that came with it. So I played a little bit of it. It is kind of creepy. I should have known that when I was playing in VR, but it's just kind of more like, not so much like gory so much now, but kind of like thrilling. Just like you don't know when these zombies are going to pop out at you. Sometimes you kind of see them shuffling around, but we'll see how that goes. Game Logic, it looks like you're doing Call of Duty Mobile, the Halloween Standoff, and Undead Siege. I'm assuming those are just different modes in there. Are those zombie modes or?
Yeah, my understanding, and again, I haven't touched them yet. But I did a little reading ahead and planning and loading the game on a tablet and charging up the controller. My understanding is it's not zombies the same way that the full-size console and PC game is, but there's a battle royale mode that has zombies in it. I think that's the Under Siege. And I'm not exactly certain what the Halloween Standoff is. I think that's just a regular multiplayer mode. But I'll be looking into exactly what the difference in the rule sets are and play modalities are in that.
All right, cool. DB, Swiss, anything you might be thinking about playing for next week, since you'll be on the show? Nothing so far?
I've got a couple. I've got a handful of Resident Evil stuff that I could dive into. I also have Saints and Sinners on VR that might come up. But really, my question is I'm away for a week, and I missed that you purchased a Oculus Quest 2. So
Oh yeah, yeah. I picked one up a few weeks ago actually. I think I was out actually before then too. Yeah, so I got the Oculus Quest 2.
that's true. I have been out. I have not I was not on the last GX show. So
Yeah.
excellent. Well, good.
Yes, so I'll be talking more VR games the next time I'm on. So we'll see, or maybe I'll jump on the show this coming week. So we'll see. Swiss, any spooky games you might jump in? It doesn't have to be like a straight up horror.
Right now, the leading candidate is Luigi's Mansion 3.
Oh yeah, that's right. I remember you had mentioned that. All right, cool. Yeah, so that's good. You got ghosts and goblins of sorts and other kind of spooky beings in that game. Maybe more comedy than horror, but hey, you never know. Might get a jump scare or two, possibly. So yes, please join us next Thursday, for our GX show. Game Logic will be the host, and SwissGuard and DBQ will be the co-hosts. Like I said, maybe I'll pop in. We'll see. We'll see what happens. Thank you, DBQ, Game Logic, SwissGuard. Great show tonight. Everybody, thanks for watching. Take care of yourselves out there, and we will see you next week.